Before we start, I just want to say I'm really sorry about the audio today. It's very, very windy. Don't let that clear blue sky deceive you. We're currently outside, so I'm doing my best. We're cutting in between the wind. That's a wind example, but yeah, sorry, we're trying our best. In today's video, we're talking about front crawl arms. Now this is a swim basics video, so I'm aiming this at beginners and people looking to improve their front crawl arms that are relatively new to swimming. We will be doing a swimming advanced series that goes more into detail about the specifics, but for now, let's get into it. The front crawl stroke or freestyle stroke consists of 4 points. So we've got the entry, the catch, the pull, and the recovery. Now those 4 stages are independent from one another and each have their own little intricacies that I'll talk about in this video. Let's start with the entry. A common thing from quite a long time ago was that you'd want your thumb to go in first. Now, this has since been there's a fly. This has since been kind of disproven because the rotation on the shoulder that causes over thousands and thousands of repetitions in the pool can put stress on the internal muscles and ligaments in the shoulder and cause injury. So what we want to do instead is we want to spear the water. This looks exactly like that. So you're going to enter the water with your middle finger first and spear the water in front of you. You don't want to spear reaching as far as you can. You actually want to spear at your full extension and then lean forward, so you get a little bit of a rotation in your shoulder. What happens here, I'll show you, is if you're swimming square in the water, your arm comes over the top from the recovery, spears the water, and then you slightly lean forward. That's only momentarily, it's very brief, but there is a slight rotation. This rotation is because as you spear, the other arm is pulling back, so you're using that other arm to get full extension on one arm and a full pull on the other. We're almost twisting our body just very slightly to make sure we're reaching as far as we can and pulling all the way back. With the catch, you want to make sure that you enter the water nice and square and start to catch that water. What that means is you're physically going to try and grab onto the water, and we want to do what's called a high elbow catch, or just a high elbow. What this means is we don't want our elbow out of the water, but instead, using the physics of the arms, we want to make sure that our elbow is higher than our wrist. What I mean by that is we don't want to just pull down beside us. We want to use our arm to keep our elbow above our wrist and pull all the way back. I'll show you underwater in a second, both in the full stroke and in slow motion, so you can see that exact movement, but essentially we're keeping our elbow above our wrist and pulling all the way back. Naturally moving on to the pull, once we've caught that water, we start to begin that pull. Now it's important that you pull close to your body. You don't want to be pulling round to the side. That's going to cause your body to sort of shimmy in the water, and that will build up over the time. It won't be as efficient, you'll use more energy, and it will cause drag. Instead, we want to enter the water in our shoulder line, essentially, in front of us, and start pulling back. We want to use our hand as a paddle. Okay, so that is the surface that we're pulling, and you'll find that your forearm actually does pull quite a lot of water. I'll talk later on in the video about a drill you can do with your fists closed like this, but for now we're pulling back all the way, making sure to keep ourselves in line, not too far out. Essentially we want to be quite narrow. Once we've pulled back, we've got the recovery. This is quite critical because it can upset the stroke essentially. We want to make sure that our arm doesn't come over too high. If you're having your arm come over too high, it's going to force your body under the water and it will cause you to kind of swim like that. That's not good. See how much water I'm disturbing. Instead, we want quite a quick recovery, about halfway in the range between your maximum reach and touching the surface of the water. What we don't want to do is drag our hand across the surface of the water, because we've just spent lots of energy pulling that water behind us, and we don't want to then push it back in front of us. So this is a common problem I see in people that are just learning front crawl or freestyle. They are dragging their hand across the water and essentially pushing the water the wrong way. And you might not think it's too much of a problem, but that is doing quite a lot to slow you down and in fact push you in the opposite direction. Having watched those videos, you might be thinking to yourself, how am I going to practice this? Grab yourself a kickboard. These are great tools for learning to swim. You can use them in front crawl, breaststroke, backstroke, and just to increase your water confidence. I really recommend these. So fingers on top, thumbs on the bottom. You're going to stretch your elbows out straight. You'll have hopefully gone back and watched or started with the Swim Basics front crawl legs video where we were practicing our flutter kick like this. That naturally leads on to you beginning your arms. So what I normally get people who are new to swimming to do is start practicing with one arm. You're going to let go of the float, have your arm at full extension, and you're going to practice pulling back, bring your arm over the top and grabbing onto the float. Then you can go again, pull back and grab onto the float. And you can really start to practice pulling that water behind you and get a feel for moving across the pool. This is a moment where you might find it very tricky for you to stay up at the top of the water. That's because you're swimming with your head out of the water. Get yourself some goggles, and if you're comfortable, try it with your face in. Now you don't have to at the beginning, but eventually you will end up swimming with your face in. So with that in mind, when you're practicing with the float, if you put your face in and you practice your arm, you will find that you're able to kick your legs and float across the top of the water without having to keep stopping. The next progression after you practice one arm and you're comfortable, bear in mind I haven't spoken about breathing yet, so ideally we will want to breathe every 3, which is 1, 2, 3 when you're swapping arms. But if you're just practicing with one arm, you can start with one arm, take a breath, then maybe move on to 2 arms, take a breath. But I would stop there, because if you're doing 2 and then coming up to breathe, you're obviously pretty good now, so you can think about swapping arms each time. So we've got one arm pulling across the pool, grabbing onto the float, and then we're swapping, other arm pulling and grabbing onto the float. And we're using that float as a base for our hands to grab on. We're able to push down on the float, which keeps us up at the top of the water, and it is essentially pushing us forward. So we are using that float to pull across the water and grab back on. So practicing 2 arms with the float, you'll then start to think about breathing with your face in. Put your face in and breathe every 3. That means that you are going to swap sides each time. I have done a video on how to breathe in front crawl where I talk about the differences between breathing every 3, every 2. I strongly recommend you go and watch that video. Essentially, I normally teach people to breathe every 3 strokes when they're learning, and then when you're swimming for exercise, I get them to start breathing every 2. So that means you'll breathe to the same side every time, and we call that a 2-beat stroke, and that helps for endurance. It mimics the natural breathing of your body, and you'll be breathing out underwater, coming up, taking your breath, as if you were running, or because you're exercising, as if you're running out. So that would mimic the natural rhythm of your breathing. I'll demonstrate now for you. I'm going to pause there. You can see when I'm swimming, I'm keeping that float in front of me. I'm not letting it drift back to me, i.e. my elbow that's holding the float is straight, as reached out as it can be, elbow locked, and when I breathe to the side, I'm able to turn my body and take my breath to the side. Now that's quite an advanced thing. You might begin by coming up to breathe like this. That's fine. If you do that, make sure that you are not lifting your body out of the water too far. What you're doing there is essentially, if your body is this float, if you lift your head out of the water, your legs have sunk. So you want to make sure that you just lift your head out far enough, i.e. your chin is still in the water, just enough so you can take your breath and then go back in. Obviously we don't always want to breathe looking forwards. Ideally, the next progression would be you learning to breathe to the side. So I'm going to refer you on to that how to breathe to the side video that we've done before. After you're comfortable practicing with the float, now I realise I'm skipping quite forward in the time that this is going to take. I wouldn't expect this to take, I'll rephrase that. This will take some time. Don't worry about it. I've been teaching someone who's an adult who had a fear of water and has just progressed to practicing with this float without me holding on to it. Now, this might be something that you watch and then ask a family member or a friend to help you, and they can guide you by simply holding on to the float. However, this float will keep you up at the top of the water. It's mainly psychological that you might think to yourself, I'm not able to swim without someone assisting me. So I know it's very easy for me to say, I promise you're going to be okay. However, try it, try and practice it. Keep persisting. It's all about persistence, because I promise you, it's in your head. Humans are really floaty. Your body wants to float at the top of the water. And if you've got all of these little things lined up, you'll be able to just swim across the top of the water. So moving on, when we are comfortable with practicing both arms, and maybe we're even practicing breathing to the side as well, you might think, what's the next progression? How do I lose this float? Well, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to practice some push and glides off of the wall and transition into using our arms to get ourselves through the water, essentially. So I'm going to show you that over here. We're at the wall, and ideally you'd want to be doing this underwater, as in your face is in the water. So you can practice just push and gliding. Excuse me, there's a leaf, we're outside. Hands in front of you, feet on the wall, and practice your push and glide. The next progression would be for you to practice your push and glide and start kicking with your legs. So essentially your hands are in front of you, they're kind of mimicking that float. Stretched out, elbows straight, both feet on the wall, start that flutter kick. The next thing would be to do what I call catch up. So you're going to keep your arms in front of you as if you had that float, and you can even pretend to hold the float, but you know, keep your hands flat. You're going to pull one arm behind you and bring it over the top. Then you're going to pull the other arm behind you and bring it to that starting point. We're going to use this as kind of like a starting point to get ourselves moving through the water. And that is what I call catch up, because one arm is sort of catching up to the other each time. So I'll show you that now very quickly. Push off the wall, start kicking. And you can practice that for a couple of lengths until you're comfortable. And then we can start to think about progressing into the full stroke. So, as you're pulling back, the other arm will have come over the top and is entering the water. So when that arm comes over, the other one is pulling. We've got the catch, we've got the entry, the catch, the pull, and then the recovery. Over and over again, and you'll see that as I'm moving, my shoulders are slightly rotating, and we're swimming front crawl. In your practice, do not worry about speed. It's not relevant. What is relevant to you is the amount of energy you're putting into the stroke versus how far you are getting in the pool. And something you can do as a performance marker to sort of gauge your ability in the water and to make sure you're consistently improving your stroke is to count your arms as you swim a length of the pool. A pool is 25 meters, so you will start at a normal pool is 25 meters. You will start at one end and you'll swim to the other. In that time, you're going to do a certain number of strokes. It might be, I can't pull a number off the top of my head, but let's, for argument's sake, say it's 15. That number is your start point, that's your base point. Then, throughout your swimming workout that day, in that sort of half hour, count your strokes. See if you can get it down to 14. That's only one stroke less. So you might think that's nothing, that's not really an improvement, where actually that's a massive improvement. If you talk about that as a percentage gain in efficiency, we're talking sort of 7.5%, whatever it might be, but that is a big gain in efficiency. And if you can get that down to 13, then you're really starting to make movement. So I would expect that to take some time, and I wouldn't expect that to be a quick process. I'm still improving, everybody's still improving, I'm sure the Olympic swimmers are still improving, but that is a clear way to make sure that you are improving your stroke. We call it swim golf. The high entry is quite tricky to understand. What I can show you is the actual physical, mechanical kind of use of the arm if we're talking about pulling something. So a way to demonstrate this is to put your hands on the side of the pool and try and lift yourself out of the pool. It's very difficult to actually lift yourself out when your elbow is below your wrist. However, if you put your elbows above your wrist, all of a sudden it's very easy to lift yourself out of the pool. It's the exact same mechanism when you're swimming. You want to make sure that your elbow is above your wrist so you can use that force to get that water behind you. If you're doing this, you're not gonna, I'll demonstrate that properly. If you're doing this, you're not gonna get any water behind you. You want to make sure your elbow stays above your wrist so you can really pull that water behind you. Keep an eye out for our Swim Basics front crawl full stroke video where I'll talk about the arms and legs together and combine it and talk about some common problems that I see. Hopefully that gets you going. If you've got any questions, ask them below, I'll happily answer them. Thank you for watching today's video. If you've got any questions, please leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, or even make a new video for you explaining the point. Please consider subscribing to our channel if you enjoyed today's video. It really helps us out and helps us continue to make these free educational videos in these lovely environments. We've had some questions about personal tuition. Now this is something we do offer. We've set up a Patreon to be able to enable this facility. We've got 10 slots available and it would be a session a month for 30 minutes or however long you need, 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever it is. One-to-one with me, I'll talk to you, we can go through any questions you have, any problems you're having. You could even record yourself swimming and send it to me. I'll watch it before our meeting. we can have a meeting. I can give you direct feedback on how to improve your swimming. So pop over there, the link's in the description, and see if it's for you. Thank you again. I'll see you in the next one.
Hi.